In the world of business, not all deals are what they seem. Fortunes rise, empires crumble, all with the stroke of a pen. Mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers. Welcome to Mergers She Wrote, where we examine strategies and stories behind the biggest deals in business. Because in M&A, the real risks are the ones you don't take. Welcome back to another episode of Merger She Wrote. I'm Paloma Goggins, your host and the owner of Nocturnal Legal. Today's guest is an expert in operations, and she's going to tell you how you can systematize your business. Welcome, Olenka Cullinan. Thank you for being on. So Olenka is an accomplished COO with 15 plus years of experience. She's been named top 100 women to watch and Phoenix 40 under 40. I love her bio. And today we are going to talk all about her consultant business, and you're going to tell us more about how you help people get in there, work as a chief operations officer, and really just get their business running better. So thank you so much for being on. I'm going to hop right into the questions.
Love it.
So let's start with your mission, and correct me if my range is wrong here, but you work with women running businesses between 500,000 and 10 million in revenue. Is that right?
That is absolutely true.
Okay, perfect. What are the most common scaling challenges that you see at that stage?
Well, I want to share a little bit more on that, and thanks for having me.
Yes.
I love it, and I love the name of the podcast.
Thank
so
you.
Appropriate. I love it. So one of the things with my mission too is the reason I'm so passionate about that is there are only 2% of women that break into $1 million mark. And for me, scaling, right, comes with one thing that I've seen so many women go through, which a lot of them burn out. A lot more women businesses suffer from burnout than failure. And because of it, I think one of the things that I focus on with scaling women in my way is balance, right? I truly say that we take them from burnout to balance, and the best way and the fastest way to get there is operations. Because women we love our aesthetics, we love everything pretty, we love, naming things, creating gorgeous spaces, creating our aesthetics and our branding, but sometimes we forget that the most important part of your business is that unsexy back end, no puns intended, that nobody wants to look at. So that's what I focus on. I truly want women to take that piece and create freedom for themselves as they're scaling.
I love that. And so when women come to you, what are like the key issues that you're seeing? Obviously, lack of systems probably is the key one, but Are there other components of that lack of systems and operations that you're seeing more frequently?
Definitely lack of time, right? We say yes to everything, and then that pretty much eats away our own time. Definitely not lack maybe, but like the way women are hiring often. We hire to relieve pressure rather than hiring for operational excellence and allowing people to become champions. And then I would say the nurture in women often kills everything because they're also excellent micromanagers. And even though they're running $1 million companies, they often operate and scale as a solopreneur at 300K.
Well, and I think that is such an important point to bring up, is that micromanaging component, because I think it's so easy, and I even myself am guilty of this, where I will rework something that's an internal process of mine for an effort to be perfection. And we all know perfection is not something that's ever attainable, right? And at some point you just got to launch. You just got to launch that system. You got to launch that process. For people who are struggling with that micromanagement, that perfectionism, obviously working with you helps them through that process, but, are there ways that someone, can sort of trick their brain to be like, oh shoot, I'm doing it again. I'm wasting my time sort of toiling over this, like one specific issue, and I should just move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's normal human quality, right? And especially for women, because we're nurturing and loving kind of traditionally, and a lot of us do care, right? Like we care so much and we want, like how many times you've heard women say, this is my baby. Okay, this is not your baby. First of all, let's just give each other permission to know that part. But also I would say it's giving yourself grace, but also knowing that you have to delegate and kind of making that choice, right? Making the choice. First of all, I tell women all the time, this is my official permission for everybody listening. Yes, they will never be as good as you. Nobody on your team or whoever you hire will never be as good as you. So my invitation is always, can they perform at 80% of your 100? Because your 100 in reality is 150. And so they will never be able to attain that level most of the time. So the goal is, I say, yes, it's B in a common, grade knowledge, but 80% in business, that means they're actually excelling. And so whenever you hire people or working on task or getting ready to launch, are we at about 80% capacity, at 80% rate, at 80% value? And if you are there, let it go and kind of accept that and make that choice that anything at 80% goes.
I like that, because inherently hiring is such a difficult next step for people. Delegation is inherently the hardest step. You don't even have to hire somebody to potentially delegate, right? And so this idea that you've got to be okay with people not being a copycat of you, because I feel like there's so much expectation there in many businesses that when you hire, that person is going to be able to fill your shoes completely. And you're so right. They're never going to fill the shoes.
No. And I always say hire B players because you can turn them into A players. Don't hire C players, because a lot of times, again, it was the previous point I brought up, people hire for relieving pressure because we're in such deadlock. We need somebody, let's just throw some money out and bring someone in. And we forget that it's almost impossible to take a C player and build them into a B player. It takes a lot longer versus taking a solid B player and, bringing them up to A level.
When we talk A, B, and C player, for someone who is new to hiring or has maybe just struggled with hiring the right people, are there ways for those people to know whether they're a B or a C?
Absolutely. It also depends, obviously, right? Like I always say, hire for skill set, but also watch the culture. If it's your first hire, it may not be a big deal because they're basically catering to you. But if you're a team, 4, 6, 10, 12, that's where a culture does play an important part. So I usually say A player is somebody who has 80% skill set of what you're looking for. 60%, we're now more like at a solid B that we have to ramp up. And then anything below 50, you don't want those people, just because, again, it's time, right? Training takes time. As you and I both know, it's probably the most expensive operational resource is humans. And also, to your point, like, do it slow. You don't have to don't wait till you are your own bottleneck to bring someone in, but also don't, rush so much that you now are having, a team of 4 and you've never really worked with one person.
I think that's really sound advice, because I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with clients and they like to throw money at the problem, and then they get into, okay, well, now they've got, like you said, hire 3 people all at once. Maybe they're not first time hires, right? But just adding a bulk of people to the team. And then to your point, training is a full-time position for most part, right? So you either have to have the bandwidth to train 3 people all at once or have people in place to train those 3 people for you, which most people, I feel like, aren't in a good position to have that either.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, and again, right, you're basically investing time up front. People forget that hiring is where you invest time up front, and then it will come, obviously it will be an amazing process later when you do train them up. But yeah, I would say, yes, start slow always, as they say, hire slow, fire fast. And I would say train slow too, because it's solid. And once you get them there, it's going to be really, really helpful in the long run. But at the first few, weeks, months, however complicated the training is, you as a founder are going to take a big bulk of it for sure.
100%. No, for sure. So you focus on creating systems for scalability. What's one system or process that, once in place, tends to immediately change how an owner operates?
I am going to say one that's probably super unusual and most people don't take too seriously. It's time. Okay. I say it because, it's basically, I call it CEO time architecture. And I'm really adamant with my clients about that, because where you are spending your time as a founder is going to become either the bottleneck in your business or the biggest growth catalyst to your business. because there are areas, and I call it vital few for all of your team, for yourself. If you don't know what your vital few are and where you're spending your time, if you're spending 80% of your time in the wrong places, that's stalling the growth for your business. And people unfortunately take time very lackadaisical. We have founders who run multi-million-dollar company who say yes to run things all the time. They spend their days what I call firefighting. That means, they're always in reactive, never in proactive. They are putting out fires. They are making things happen. They're checking in, dialing in, touching base. And then before we do all those things, there is no time to actually be in your CEO position, in your position that allows the company to grow. You are the only person as a founder, no matter how big or small your company is, who can make big moves. Right? Your VAs can't do it. Your second in command can't do it most of the time. And so for me, creating that time architecture either frees up your schedule to make massive growth, or it's going to be the biggest bottleneck in your company.
I like that. And I also feel like as someone who, like you, runs a business and is exceptionally busy, if someone is wanting to implement more time into their schedule, what are things that you recommend that someone can do? Because I think a lot of times most of us look at our calendar, our schedule, and even if we block off time, it's so easy to get off track, or like you said, start fighting fires, or getting, waist deep in your inbox, and all of a sudden you look up and half your afternoon is gone. So what are some easy, like low-hanging fruit kind of tactics for making time or creating that CEO day that you're talking about?
Yeah, for sure. Like one thing I highly recommend testing for everybody, I call it the green marker game. It's super easy. You basically every Friday look at your calendar and see, like, highlight in green all the money-making activities you are doing for your position, right? It doesn't always mean that you're client-facing if you have a team, a sales team, but what are you doing as a CEO, as a leader, and where you spend your time? Because a lot of times I see, even with my clients, when they highlight everything in green and they're like, I spent 10% of my time in green. What am I doing? Right? Like a lot of times it's a biggest wake-up call because we don't realize even where our time goes. So that's one thing. Another thing, I would definitely create some blocks in your schedule. And what I'm saying, like if you're not working on block schedule, I'm a big proponent of that because it confronts you with your time. If you're writing things in your calendar when you know you don't have time to write it, that means you are out of time, and you have to be candid and honest about it. And a lot of us say yes to things when we don't even have time to do them, and then we're burned out and resentful, right? So create blocks where it allows you to kind of like take analysis of where you're spending time on, depending what your North Star is at that moment, right? Are you growing? Then you should be spending most of your time on growth. Are you kind of in a solid, position now where you're dominating the market? Then how can we create better processes? If we're in the hiring stage, then what are we, where can we hire, why, we're hiring? So I would say create blocks that allow you to spend time on the CEO time and don't give it up, because a lot of times the leaders are their worst business owners. They're like their own worst bosses because they take their own time off the calendar so easily. So don't take your time off the calendar.
I love that. I think it's such a slippery slope for so many founders, right? I'm even guilty of that. I'll like reserve time on my calendar to take like an afternoon walk around just to get up from my desk, and it's the first thing that gets written over, or I'm look up the walk time that was like half hour is just gone. I've done emails through the whole process.
Yes, so. super candid moment. I was literally like yelling at myself metaphorically this morning because I allowed my calendar to get out of control in the last 2 days, and I'm like, this is crazy. I teach this, like what? And I'm very quick to notice, so I'll be the first one to like self-confront, as I call it. But yeah, it's definitely a slippery slope.
Had to put yourself on a pip.
That's right. That's right.
You're like, okay, Olenka, we need to do better.
Let's have a talk.
Oh, that's too funny. When a founder says that they want to scale, what are the first signs to you that maybe they might actually not be ready to scale yet?
Yeah, I definitely say look at your profit margins, and to scale you need usually funding of sorts, right? Like what are we scaling and in which way? And so do you have financial support and financials in general, right? Like I always say, when we scale, I want you to have clean financials, and I want you to have a clear understanding where we're going, because it's so easy to say yes and then we're like scrambling and struggling, because a lot of times, as you know, and I'm sure you've seen it with what you do. Bad scale can destroy companies or definitely stall them quite a bit. So you have to be cautious with that. And the other piece also is how willing are you to delegate? Because I don't care, like I have so many founders and I've met so many founders who say, I want to scale. And then they're the ones who are basically doing one step forward, two step back, because they will release the rein a little bit and then micromanage everyone to death. So we definitely want to be ready and understanding that what takes you to get to that first million is not going to be the same to get you to the 10 million, because here you still can like struggle, scramble by and crawl your way as a solopreneur for most part, maybe having a team of VAs to that first million. But by the time you're growing million to 5 to 10, you definitely will have to have a team.
No, that makes sense. And I was going to say, kind of tangential to that point, I think a lot of people will hear the advice of like delegate or hire, but to your point, you have to look at the financials first before you pull the trigger on that, because even if you are the bottleneck right now, but your financials don't allow you the freedom to operate safely with employees, you might have just taken on a bunch of employees that you're going to struggle to afford. And to your point, one step forward, two steps back, all of a sudden you're in crisis mode trying to bring in more revenue to cover the nut essentially. And that's not a position you want to be in either.
Never. Yeah. And that creates, I feel like, again, so much stress for some companies that it basically then they start almost like scaling back by default, which is also not a good place. Yeah.
Agreed. I was going to say some of the conversations that I've had with clients where we sit down and we're talking about a future exit, right? Not anytime soon, but just it's on the horizon. They're growing, they're successful, they know they have value in their business. And, you know, we'll talk about, okay, well, if you want to continue to grow for the next 5 years for an even bigger exit, in order to scale, you have to your point, make the time. You have to have not just the CEO time, but you have to have either the team in place to be able to implement the systems and follow through with them, because no different than working with them on legal documents. Like I come in and I'm like, you guys haven't had an operating agreement drafted since the 1990s, and you don't even have the same people owning the business anymore. And, you know, we could run down this laundry list of things that are just good hygiene for the business. But when it comes time, they still have to work with me in order for me to draft the document. And if they don't carve out the time to do that, I'm left, you know, to essentially put in a bunch of blanks in a document and say, hey, when you want to make the time, let's chat and we'll complete this document. And then sometimes it never gets completed. Yeah. So to your point, if they don't have the ability to devote time and resources to the actual effort of scaling and systemizing their business, what's it for?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Yes, strategic and intentional, right? Are the two words we definitely want to plug in there. And yes. I'm sure you see that a lot.
Let's talk about exit readiness. So how early should a business start thinking about an exit strategy? And I want to take this time to talk a little bit about your personal experience with exiting.
Yeah, for sure. I say, you know, I tell businesses you should start building an exit or think about it at least when you're profitable, right? So again, it's that conversation of time and money combined is the best time. And I don't think there's necessarily too early as long as you're profitable and you are there, because buyers want predictability, as you know. Buyers want a business that's not heavy on CEO or founder, because they want to know that if that person were to exit, they can still continue. They want clean financials. They want clean SOPs. They want some kind of operational system that's very easy to follow. So the more predictability you create in your business, which if you take the exit out of the picture is really just a sign of good business. And if you run your business with intention, with care, with that, you know, system and operational pieces that need to be in place, I per se don't have too early. I've always knew, so that's speaking to my own exit. I've always known that, you know, the Rising Tycoons company that I was running, and I ended up selling IP to Discovery Ed. I didn't know how it was gonna be, but I always ran it with an idea that we will get to the time where it's not a legacy company, right? It was a great company. It was something I loved doing. I mean, we put over almost 10,000 kids through the program in 4 years, 1,500 educators, launched it in 3 countries. It was like startup on steroids. But from day one, I knew that I wanted to run it in a system, in a place, in the way that it was presented, where we could take a piece or all of a company and create that freedom, whether it's exit, whether it's making it a nonprofit, where it's bringing someone else to run it. So I always looked at options early on as soon as we started making profit. And by the way, I want to make a very distinct difference. Profit, not revenue, because there are plenty of companies out there that can show you significant revenue with very little profit. So we definitely want to focus on profits in that case.
Excellent point. I feel like for anyone who doom scrolls out there and sees the people who publish their revenue, it's such a misguided revenue metric, because at the end of the day, you're right. It's not always indicative of how successful the business is, but it looks on paper like they're crushing it. So some misconceptions out there. And also I think it gives the false idea that it's so easy to just go out there and build $1 million business.
Right, in 3 days. And then you can have all the Instagram real moments and yachts and cars and all the things you can imagine. But yeah, and especially for you, I'm sure when you are doing, whether it's merger, whether it's, exit, you can see that profit is what drives it, right? The EBITDA, all the things that actually show how successful a business really is.
Yes. Well, and I was going to say too, a key factor, you talked about having, a very CEO-centric business being problematic, key man, key woman syndrome, right? Where you pull the founder out and all of a sudden the business ceases to be. That's a huge factor in a lot of small businesses, especially in the Valley here. But also I see a lot people not realizing that, the financials, like you were saying, the financials are so critical, but a lot of times people will look at the variation or the density of clients. And there are so many businesses that I've seen personally that either struggle to find a buyer because buyers are very nervous to buy a business where there's 2 major players that are providing all the revenue. And if you lose those 2, the bulk of the revenue is gone, right? But also just this idea that maybe there is no business if that one big client is gone. You see that a ton with government contracting or local government contracting, especially in the Valley here. You might have a street sweeper company and they've got the city of, Mesa or Chandler or whatever, and that is their main client and they're crushing it. But, that if that city pulls out and gets another bid,
absolutely,
what happens then?
Right. And I literally had this conversation a couple of days ago with another client who's in accounting. And the conversation was exactly that. I said, I don't need you to go find more clients to prove a point. I want you to find more clients. So if you ever were to sell, which there is some conversation and thought in that direction, you actually can prove that it's not luck, right? You didn't just get lucky. You actually show a business model that's running with multiple various entities. So it's such a good point.
So let's go back to your exit a little bit before I go to my next question.
Sure.
As someone who has built, scaled, and exited a business, for anyone who is somewhere along that process, right? Because, people don't realize you've got to start somewhere. You could be growing and still have that exit opportunity in the future. And then you could also be kind of at the tail end where you have value and you're thinking about exiting imminently. What are some things that you learned from that process that would be helpful for someone listening to learn about and potentially apply to their business as well?
Yeah, for sure. Such a good question. And honestly, all the things you probably don't want to learn are so key. Like obviously knowing your financials. And truly, I don't need you to be an accountant and no one needs you to know all the, specialty and all the products and everything, but you absolutely need to know main numbers in your business. Are you profitable? What takes you to get profitable? How much you need to scale? What are you trying to scale on, right? Like what's your goal? And I always say to me that piece with financials, I mean, you're basically buying your freedom in whichever way, like you said, whether it's exit, whether it's merger, whether it's just you bringing to run someone else to run it, you have to create that freedom. So know your financials, definitely have very, very standard operating procedures, very, very standard. The easier you can make them and more palatable they can be for other people to come in and run, the easier and more attractive it's going to be for any buyers. This is what actually, and it was interesting, right? Because when my exit happened, it was a complete accident. But because I think internally, and I grew up with a mother who was a CEO who basically thrived on operations, who taught me from day one that I don't care how pretty it is and aesthetic it is and brand, and we love all those pieces. But if you don't know your operations, if you don't understand the core, you're never going to be able to scale. And I think she drilled that into me so much that everything we built was built on SOPs. Everything was built on a very clear, like standard operational procedures. I had key players in place. I've always hired people. I would say one strength that I do have even now, I've always brought people who could run it without me. Meaning, it doesn't mean that I'm not still a key player. It doesn't mean I'm not a key woman and I don't bring my ideas, but they, in terms of operations specifically, like it just happened in my personal life. I'm going to share something personal. My mom passed away recently.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. But because of it, I was able to completely walk away for 2 weeks, not worry about it. All my clients were taken care of. Everything was running. They were doing, in some places, probably a better job than me, candidly. But it's again, and I'm sharing this personal, story here because I think so many people underestimate the value of how much freedom you can create in your business if your operations are in place, your SOPs are written properly, and anyone can step in to run them. And then also, your financials.
I think that is incredibly powerful because nobody realizes quite how much freedom they want or potentially deserve in their business until something happens in your personal life where you do need that time. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of times those events aren't the most painful events in your life, but they also are a reality check about, is your business, because it's wonderful to hear that you were able to do that. And obviously, a woman of your word, right? This is stuff that you teach and you're like, executing it on your own personal level too.
Yeah.
But I think so many business owners are on the opposite end of that spectrum where something happens or they have to take time away or they get injured or something and their business ceases to exist without them. It's a reality check for a lot of those business owners to then realize, okay, shoot, I need to go back to the drawing board because this isn't sustainable and I can't take any type of pause away, regardless of vacation, right? The important stuff.
It's unexpected important stuff, right?
Yes.
As I say it, we don't predict that. But honestly, I'm not going to lie. I was very proud of myself. I'm like, well, I'm making
yes, you should be.
I'm definitely doing her proud. That was, definitely a reminder.
Yeah, no, for sure. If it just the best way to honor her memory is like, Mom, I'm taking time away and not having to worry about it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. What's a real world story, no names needed, obviously,
absolutely,
of a business owner who went from chaos and burnout to running a scalable, sellable business, and what shifted for her?
Yeah, it's actually a reason I launched my business, believe it or not. This company that I started first was built because of this. So this story of my best friend, she allows me to share it pretty much publicly, but
it's a good best friend.
She is a good best friend. But yeah, the day she brought her company to $1 million in revenue, I showed up at her office and she was at her desk bawling her eyes out and said, I hate everything. And I came with champagne and flowers thinking we're going to celebrate that. And I watched her build it from ground up, and so that was the reason when I said, okay, this is something and I've seen a few of those episodes before, right? But this was definitely resonating. We've been friends for 20 years. So it hit home. And I thought, okay, there's some kind of disconnect in all these solopreneur founders who are running so hard for that revenue goal that they forget that there is freedom goal in between that. There is time goal that's underlying here. And so because of her, and actually she has been my client now for about 7 years, people who are closest to you are going to take the longest. That is a true story. But because of that, she was able to streamline her operations completely. She actually, it's pretty interesting. She's an attorney. And so we were able to bring her practice from 7 attorneys to 2 and not lose their revenue because we've built their support staff
That's
around
incredible.
them quite a bit. And so, and watching her grow in her revenue, but now she actually takes time off. She's planning to go to Portugal next summer for 2 months, just watching her live the lifestyle now that she wanted to create is what makes me exceptionally obviously proud of her, but also really excited for me because I'm watching these things unfold. Like, the pieces that we're putting together in the puzzle, I actually unfold in real life. And that's honestly why I love running my business and doing what I do, is because when the light bulb goes on in these business owners, it's pretty extraordinary to watch them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think as a listener, my one question would have been, okay, you took a larger group of people,
Yes,
and you reduced it to a smaller group of people. And I think for most individuals, setting aside that it's a law practice, right? I mean, most people are in there's service industry and then there's product industry, right? But like if you're in service industry, the thought of taking your team and reducing it sounds unimaginable.
Yes.
And what was like the key factor in being able to reduce, the human part kind of equation to it that made that workable?
It's really evaluating your team in terms of the level of, service they deliver, meaning if they're high level, more expensive level of service, we want to have obviously fewer of those people because they're really expensive for the business. And then, but also then seeing how do we create enough support for them? Are there tasks and abilities and processes that we can outsource to someone else? And it doesn't mean that she doesn't have high level staff. It's just attorney is her highest level, right? Which means we brought a lot more skilled paralegals. So some of the cost of her staff increased at different levels. We decreased the highest level, we increased some of the middle level. And I can also tell you it would be the same. I do this audit with all of my clients. I look at the cost of your team and what are they doing and where they are underutilized. I was with a business owner this morning who told me his second and third in command had about 25% capacity, which was crazy to me, which means they're underutilized by 30%, but yet we keep hiring lower level management and keep throwing money on a problem when we have options sitting right here in front of us, right? So I'm very cautious with that. So I always audit the team cost in terms of like cost to value ratio. And then I also would invite you, and that's for all business owners out there, audit your customer to value ratio, because a lot of you take clients that for a fact you should let go a long time ago, but you have that fear of letting go with everybody, and therefore they're draining the life out of you, but they're not bringing that much value to the company.
If a business owner was going to take a hard look at their client base or patient base, whatever it is for that business, and try and scale back the individuals who are sucking the life out of the business or just aren't the right people, what are some tools that someone can just utilize just to get going on this process? Yeah. Because I feel like you said, a lot of business owners are fearful of letting go, but they're also fearful of letting revenue walk out the door, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times people say yes to projects or to customers that maybe aren't the right fit, but it makes more dollars come in through the door. And so what are some questions maybe that they can just ask themselves in this process?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, again, right, like when we're looking at the low revenue level clients, and potentially sometimes it's in product businesses too, right? Not all your products are bringing the revenue that you need, and you keep pouring into them into the inventory. So you have to do that same type of audit there too. But with service-based business especially, I would say basically evaluate all your clients, look at the value ratio to the cost ratio, look at the time that you're giving them. And maybe if you're not even ready to let go of some of the lower level clients, at least start seeing, can we delegate them? Can I give them to my junior team member? Because the goal is really to free up your time, right? Or the upper level team manager team that you have, So start looking first at if we were to let go, how much revenue would we lose? We don't have to cut everything, right? We can do it very, very slowly. There's also ways where I found it with my clients where we would start offloading low-level revenue clients to someone else in return of exchange of some kind of kickback, of some kind of, royalty, whatever you want to call it. So there are ways I would say, do it slowly, evaluate the numbers first, figure out if there is a way, offload it, create some kind of royalty deal or percentage deal, and then can we do it, give it to the lower level team members, but also start seeing, could I bring one large client to substitute 5 small clients, which is usually the case, and then how can I find that one and start kind of creating at the top, so then we can slowly let go of the bottom.
I like that. No, I think this next question kind of ties into this process of culling, right? Of going in and reevaluating your staff, your customers, maybe your product line. In your experience, what's the biggest mindset block that prevents founders from building a business that can run without them?
Fear, not faith. You know, a lot of them run on fear that, exactly to your point, if I let go of this, I will never get another higher level client. I will not get a bigger revenue stream. So that's one. It's really working on what do I need to do and how do I need to show up and what identity I have to take on to actually go and find more bigger clients that are going to be life-changing for me. And for the company, obviously. So that's one thing. But also the other big mindset block, I would say, is I do everything best. The I got it mentality, especially with women. I'm like, you don't got nothing. Okay, let's start there. And nobody's trying to pry anything out of your hands. We're just trying to figure out like what's the biggest time suck right now, essentially, right? Where's the bottleneck? Is that the client level? Is that at operational level? Is that at time level? So let's release that first. And as we start doing that, usually it's a trickle down effect. But again, what I am inviting everyone to do when you go into this like fear state, remind yourself, you build this. You have the most power. You have the ultimate control. You could literally stop everything. You can start offloading clients and they say, haha, just kidding. I want everybody back, right? So you have the power technically to change things on a dime at any point. So you don't need to be so afraid that if you say yes or no to one thing, it somehow is the whole business is gonna go, crash and burn. It's not the case. So slow and steady, I would say.
Well, and I like what you had to say, which is like, you built this business typically from the ground up. So if you have any concerns about your ability to make a change that maybe you didn't end up liking and then changing it back the other direction, I don't see why you wouldn't have the faith that you could do that. Have faith in yourself since you've done this before. Right. You've done it before. But I also like this idea of, leading from fear. I was reading this book from Brene Brown about how, people struggle to ask for help, but a specific women specifically struggle asking for help. And this idea that, I feel like we're all a little bit guilty of this at some point or another, where you have someone in your business and you're like, it'll be faster if I just do it. And the reality is, if you say that enough, you're not utilizing the people who you've onboarded to help alleviate the pressures of you doing everything in your business. And so, like you said, taking the time to train someone to do that task, which you currently only know how to do quickly and accurately, will pay off dividends in the end, but you have to take that time and invest it in order for it to work. And at the end of the day, you have to know when you need to ask for help, which for most people is probably now. You should ask for help now.
Yeah. And I honestly, especially when I work with women clients, I say, I want you to use words, I need help, because women are also masters at writing this elaborate emails or text messages or having a phone conversations. They'll use every version of it except for a direct, I need help with. And so I actually require my clients to start using it in their vocabulary where they specifically use the words, I need help with, because I also look at it as selfish. I say, if you're not allowing people around you, people on your team, people who are your vendors, partners, whichever way you're going, to ever show up for you, you're basically robbing them of their ability, of their innate ability, where they want to show up in their heroic moment. And then they never get to do that. So to me, it's also a very selfish way to look at it. And I know it's a mind shift for a lot of people, but I would also start thinking of it from that perspective too.
I like that. You've seen behind the curtain of many businesses. What's, besides financials, because we've talked about that, what's one underrated metric or habit that successful founders consistently prioritize?
SOPs, for sure, yeah. Because a lot of times I think hiring and just growing a team fails because people they're like, I have it in my head. Fabulous. Joe here, who is coming in next week, is not going to have any idea and not going to be able to text you, call you at all random times of the day. So especially with technology, the way we have now with AI coming in, you have so many ways to make your SOPs super, super easy. And I tell people all the time, I want you to do a Loom video, use the AI, download that script. This is your SOP, right? You don't even have to write anything anymore. Just literally sit at your desk, drink a coffee, talk through a piece of whatever process they're doing in your company and let them implement that. And I always invite founders. This is a very cool trick. And if you haven't done it yourself, highly recommend. Whenever you implement SOPs, I want you to take that SOP, whoever wrote that, it obviously doesn't need to be you, it could be somebody on your team, and run it. Actually use the SOP to execute the process, because you're going to see all the holes, all the shortcuts that don't need to be there always. But yeah, I would say not giving enough priority to SOPs. I think they need to come as early as possible. Even when you work by yourself, you should have basically systems, templates, SOPs very, very early on, even if you're a solopreneur.
Well, and to your point, if you do eventually bring someone on, having those SOPs in place from the get-go, even when you're all by yourself, makes bringing those people on so seamless and easy. There's no additional work for training or onboarding potentially if you already have a library of SOPs. Yes. The one thing that I feel like, too, when you're keeping track and updated on your SOPs, because inevitably your business is evolving. And I see this with my clients where I'm like, where you were last year compared to this year. I mean, especially I have a client who continues to acquire 2 to 3 businesses every year. Mm-hmm. His business is changing drastically year over year. And so for him, any SOPs that he's implementing across one business that's going to impact all of them, I mean, he's got to carve out the time. Otherwise, next year, he'll be a business of 10 businesses and it will all be so disjointed. And so, I think that it's critical to... It's a never ending, it's an evergreen process. It's not just a one and done.
No. Just like strategy, right? It's not a 1 year, New Year's resolution thing. We always look and tweak for sure.
For someone who is a founder that's stuck in a lower revenue bracket, maybe that $1 million bracket, or maybe even a sub $1 million bracket. And they're like, I just want to get past the 1 million, or I want to get above to a higher number, 2 million, whatever it is, right? Yeah. We always want more. And they feel stuck, working too hard for too little freedom. Obviously, through this conversation, we know the SOPs are critical, mindset is critical, having staff is critical, but what's something else that, a piece of advice that you could give for someone that's trying to break through to that next threshold?
Yeah, well, I'm going to offend them first, and then I'm going to give the solution. So I always say that the issue is not the market, it's not the audience, it's not whatever product issues you're having, it's you, right? So I would say first you have to take a really hard look in the mirror and say, where am I working on? Like, where am I spending 80% of my time? To then see how we can free up that time to create the revenue. Because most of the time at that level, it's still either just them or them with very few team members. So like the resources are still limited, right? So it's not like they can say, let me throw some money at X. So they have to be very cautious about where the resources are going. And so my invitation would be to see where can the most revenue in the next 6 months, a year, a year and a half come from. I would say usually I'd stick with it like 3 to 6 months, really that first jump. Where can we bring the most revenue? Who can be responsible for that? And what needs to happen in my schedule, like literally this week, for me to free up the time? Because what I see usually with founders like that, they get so caught up in that like stress of, it's almost like stress less resentment. I'm working so hard and nothing is happening. But 90% of the time, Paloma, and I hate to say that, but I've seen it like over and over and over, 90% of the time they're working on the wrong things because they're literally running the same tracks. So my invitation first would be breathe, walk away, sit with yourself, really take a hard look in the mirror.
Take a pause.
Take a pause. Give yourself a lot of grace to, again, remind yourself, I've built this. Like I can change this at any point, but then also decide where's this jump coming from and get like granular. Get granular to the dollar, that if we brought, 10 clients at this revenue level, we could have additional, $250,000 come in 6 months. What does it look like? How granular do I have to get? But most importantly, how can I get time to monitor that? Because most of the time they have to be responsible for creating that level of a jump, and they have to find time to do it.
Well, I was going to say too, I feel like it's always this misconception, and I do think social media plays a role in this. And unfortunately, I'm sure you see it a lot of times with the people you work with, but I see it too. People come to me and they're like, I want to buy this business on 100% seller financing. And I'm like, that doesn't exist. I would love to have that be a thing for you, but it doesn't exist. And, especially with the higher interest rates over the last, 9 months, I feel like people are really like, I'm going to buy this business on really just a promissory note. And I'm like, that's not happening. But alongside that, there's this misconception, I think, with a lot of clients about how do we run in a way that builds and scales us to a point where we can successfully exit. And they're, like you said, they're kind of running in place. They're stuck in their bubble, not being able to visualize or see the big picture. And I think this idea, going back to what you said earlier about doing an audit of your time. And there's software out there that you can do that for you. So if you don't have the time to audit your time, you can buy a software that will help audit your time that you spend clicking around on your computer to determine what you've done throughout the day. I had downloaded that once and it was an eye opener. I'm like just clicking around in my inbox for hours at a time. But I think there are ways, like, I think people make excuses, and I wonder sometimes, how to get through to those clients that, they want and desperately need the help to get them to that next level, whether that's selling or scaling or even just leveling up in a way that their business is more organized. Are there ways that you have learned to talk with your clients to give them not like the kick that they need, but essentially like the reality check of like, if you don't do this, we can't achieve the goal that you want.
And I always say the same line, numbers don't lie. So I always invite them for whatever trip we're going on, whether it's auditing the time, auditing the clients, auditing the team. I always show numbers. I break down, I create a pretty simple metric that I take time to create, and I walk them through. And I honestly, most of the time, it's not even about the kick. I don't even say anything. I just say, I want to show you, right? Like it's like show and tell. I'm just going to show you this is where we're spending time currently. This is where we're spending money currently. This is where we are having client, issues currently. And if 99.8% of the time, if I walk them through numbers without even adding my own commentary, they go, whoa, this is crazy. It's like they're day one in the business. Welcome to your business. But I think it's partially because a lot of times it's plain old fear again, right? Like a lot of times we're so scared to look that we would rather almost like, I can't tell you how many women I meet who never look at their financials because they're like, I don't want to know. My accountant knows. Well, the accountant could die tomorrow, no offense, right? And we can't just rely on that. So we just want basics. Like if you know top level numbers, at least you have a pretty good idea. That's where wake up calls come in most of the time. And usually all my conversations with start, let's just look at numbers. And then you tell me where you think we need to go next. And most of the time, like I said, it's their day one wake up call and they're really, really open. They may be still scared. And that's where I usually remind them that, I'm here, I'm going to handhold you for the process, or your support system is going to be there. They're not going to, just disappear on you. Your team's not going to walk out because we're going to show them where we have holes right now. So yeah, it's just having that conversation.
I like that. I like the idea of you don't even need to have the tough conversation. You just need to show them where the sort of hurdles lie or the roadblocks per se. I was thinking as you were explaining this about the last thing I had said about, if you don't have the time to look at your own time, there's software to do that. And I feel like as someone who has been operating her own business, and I know a lot of fellow female entrepreneurs feel the same way, there is so much software out there. It's endless. And it's so easy to just throw money at another software solution and then just have a conglomerate of a bunch of random stuff that doesn't communicate. And so for someone like, maybe they don't come to you and they're completely lost in their business, but they're deep in quicksand and they're like, I need to figure out which way is up at the end of the day. What do you tell those people? How do you work through that with them? Because like I can imagine, for some businesses who have decided to bootstrap it along the way, and there's so many options for software out there, I even had to cull my own software, last year, where I realized I had just too many options that were not communicating. What do you do with those clients for starters?
I literally tell them, I want you to take your financials and throw them in something with AI, like as simple as ChatGPT. And obviously don't put all the financials there. It's still open AI, right? But take basics and say, these are my current hurdles, right? I'm out of time and out of money. Could be option one. I'm out of time. I do have the money, or I have the money and I have, maybe I have the time, but not the money. So usually the variations are pretty simple, right? So if you just put that into one place and then you say, okay, show me what is if you were to prioritize the 3 things I need to work on next, show me what steps I should take. You don't need a lot of different software options to create something like that, right? You can, like I said, decide for yourself. Is it the time issue? Get a time software that's going to pull you through. If it's a financials issue, figure out some kind of software that allows you to just break down the basic financials for you. If it's, you have the money, show me my 3 top clients or my 3 top product channels and how we can deploy them to build the next step. So pick the area. It's usually, like I said, it's really only 3 variations. No time, no money, no both. I mean, if it's no both, it's a little bit harder. Yeah, a little bit harder. But again, then I always say, and by the way, this is my personal advice. I'm sure there are many other coaches that may disagree or consultants. My advice is always, if you're out of time and out of money, you free up time first because it's faster. And we are going for further faster module here. So how can I get you out of this? And at least if you free up some time, you can start looking for resources, because sometimes money does take a little bit to kind of create whichever way it's going, whether it's financing, whether it's, talking to potential clients or a channel partner or something like that. But if you free up some time, you can at least start creating space to think.
No, I like that the buckets, right? Yeah. The 3 buckets. And to your point, I think anybody who's come kind of as far as they think that they can come, obviously, I think at the end of the day, the 2 pieces of advice that are critical, or at least 3, I probably would say, is like, look at your finances and know them intimately, right? Yeah. 2, if you don't have any systems or even anybody helping on your team, that's probably the 2 areas you could focus on right away. And don't underestimate the level of help you can get from speaking to someone like yourself, because I think a lot of people back to this idea of like, I can do it myself, I don't need help. I don't think people really realize, even in my field, they'll come to me and they'll think the business is, they've got the contracts on lock. Like they used them from, the get-go. They had ChatGPT rewrite them. And I'm like, oh gosh, not that again. And so we got to have that moment of experts are helpful because you don't know what you don't know. Right. So you're filling the gaps.
Right.
I think this has been super helpful. In closing, I would love to know, anything else that you would want to tell someone who's listening, who's a business owner, who's thinking about scaling, and maybe any resources beyond reaching out and speaking with you?
Yeah, no, for sure. Definitely. Well, one thing I could say for sure, that I don't care how strong your brand is and how much revenue you're bringing. Again, if your operations are not in check, that freedom is going to be very hard to create. And I've seen a lot of very successfully looking businesses, like we said, the Instagrammable moments, but when you start digging, there is no freedom there. So for me, I always say the biggest flex for any business owner is how little their business depends on them. So that would be one part in advice. And then, I would say if you're at all, because we're talking, on the Exit podcast, really, if you're at all, one of my favorite books is obviously The Art of Selling Your Business. So if you haven't read it, definitely read it. And then Build to Sell. It's the same author, I believe. They're both really great because, again, the earlier you start getting ready. And to me, when I look at Exit, I look at it as creating freedom, whichever way it's going to pan out, whether it's you selling, you merging, you stepping away, you bringing someone else to run it, franchising it, licensing it. But selling essentially is an exit that allows to create freedom.
I love that. And I think at the end of the day, most business owners have the exit idea in their brain. Not everyone, but a lot of them have that exit idea in their brain. And I think operations are the key that unlocks that potential for exit in the future.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Olenka, for being a guest today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paloma.
Of course. If you like this episode, please like, share, and tune in for next week. In the world of business, not all deals are what they seem. Fortunes rise, empires crumble, all with the stroke of a pen. Mergers, acquisitions, hostile takeovers. Welcome to Mergers She Wrote, where we examine strategies and stories behind the biggest deals in business. Because in M&A, the real risks are the ones you don't take.